Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Off the Ball Podcast. I'm here with Anthony Martinez and our special guest, JD Gunn. JD, great to have you on, and Anthony, a pleasure to do the first episode with you as well.
No, I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Anthony and we're going to start off here. We're going to talk a little bit about JD's career. And JD's career is a really fascinating one. JD originally grew up in Panama, moved to the U.S. when he was 15. Came to the U.S. originally because he wanted to play basketball, and he felt like there was a better route to play basketball here. And Anthony was fortunate enough to spend a little bit of time with him at Memphis in college. Prior to that, JD was at Biola. And Anthony, for you, what really stands about JD's career and kind of how he's gotten up to this point?
Yeah, I think for me, I obviously had the opportunity to play with JD for only one semester, but I think one semester was enough dealing with him because I wouldn't want to be behind that guy in the fall. Great guy, natural leader, kind of first day he stepped in the door, already knew that future team captain, and I knew he would have a great career going on because he always put in the extra work, always was on time, set a good example for the lads and myself. I was a younger guy, freshman at the time, and JD came in as a fifth year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Set a really good example for me and a lot of the younger guys. So, yeah, no shock to see him have all the success, especially with Panama recently, and still just big influence for me.
Yeah, that's a great leeway there, and we'll bring JD into the conversation here. Obviously, you make your full national team debut just a little bit over a month ago now, and how amazing was that experience for you? Obviously, to represent your home country in front of pretty much a sold out stadium in an unbelievable atmosphere.
Yeah, honestly, probably the coolest experience of my life to this point. Um, it was like 60, 70,000 people. So just being able to play in an atmosphere like that, that's the type of thing that you dream of and the type of professional experience you think of. Um, the result didn't go our way that day, but it's still good to be able to make my debut for the national team. And I think it's definitely a good step for me in the right direction for my career. I'm hoping that it's just the beginning, but obviously that's going to come with more hard work. But yeah, no, the experience was incredible.
Yeah, no doubt. And something that's interesting, obviously, about your kind of time with the national team is like obviously growing up, you were a basketball player in Panama. So what was that experience kind of getting in contact with, the National Federation and kind of obviously growing your relationship with them over the years? How did they kind of get in contact with you to begin with? And was there any kind of period of like, they were kind of asking like, where were you during the youth process and everything like that?
Yeah, so honestly, it's kind of funny the whole how it all worked out. Um, the first experience I had with any type of national team, like with the federation, was I think it was like a U15 like camp, and I came and trained with them for a few days, but then I like didn't hear from them for a few years. So it was pretty interesting start to my national team exposure. To be fair, like in terms of youth stuff, I like wasn't serious enough about soccer to be involved with any type of youth national team stuff. Again, because like you mentioned, basketball was my sport, so I was pursuing that. Um, but more recently, like when I first got my first call up in October for friendlies against US and Canada, I had been talking with the national team for a little while. In 2023, I believe it was, I did like a mini camp with the U23 team where the head coach of the senior team saw me play and everything. And basically, they said, we really like you, but you're not playing professionally yet, so we don't want to call you up to any national team stuff. So I was like, okay. So that was going into my last season at Memphis, and I was like, I'm not gonna, skip out on my last season at Memphis because I think I'll have good opportunities to play in the States after that. Because at the time they were telling me like, oh, we can get you signed to a team in Panama, but I was like, I don't know if that's the route I want to go quite yet. So ended up playing at Memphis and then obviously signed with the Revs, and then from there started, being more serious with the national team, having more direct contact with them until, getting my first call up in October.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that pathway is It's very interesting, and I think it's a little bit unique in that I think you look at somebody like, typical United States pathway, they get that contact very early on, and I think that's true for any national team. And for those that are unfamiliar with just how big of a deal football is in Canada, or Panama, excuse me, could you describe just how much the Panamanian nation cares about their national team? I mean, the atmosphere. I think of how many times they played the U.S. national team. The atmosphere seems crazy in those games, but just typically how big of a deal it is growing up there in Panama.
Yeah, well, just to start, we made the World Cup for the first time in 2018, and the day we qualified for the World Cup became a national holiday. So if that doesn't tell you about the love for football down in Panama, I don't know what does. Um, but yeah, I mean, growing up in a place like Panama where everyone plays soccer, it's pretty unique compared to the States where there's so much more division, I guess, in types of sports that kids are playing, like football, basketball, baseball. You still have a little bit of that in Panama, but for the most part, everyone plays soccer. Um, so, all my friends growing up were always playing soccer, and I was kind of the one that was different playing basketball. But even though I wasn't necessarily pursuing it at the time, just being exposed to soccer all the time and playing like on the street, playing at recess, whatever, I think started to give me a love for the game from an early age, even though it wasn't necessarily something I was, really considering pursuing. But I think that helped in the long run, obviously, and to the switch that I made to soccer later down the road.
Definitely. I think that's a really interesting perspective there. And I think the way it's kind of almost the opposite here in the United States. I think of my background growing up, at least it was the other way around. Like I was exposed to basketball, football, all different sports through recess and just playing on the street or in the backyard with my friends or whatever. And brings us kind of the next point of the conversation here is obviously you grew up playing basketball and that had such a huge, point of reference in your life and it really inspired you to take the next step eventually to the United States. But, what about basketball brought you within Panama? Like why did you pursue basketball so much growing up in Panama when it was really not the main sport for the country?
Because he's
Yeah,
6'5".
yeah. Well, I mean, being tall helps, but yeah, definitely. My family is from the States, so I wasn't brought up in a soccer family. To be honest, my family, the only reason they like soccer now is because of me. So, my two older brothers were basketball players, so I always wanted to be like them. I always wanted to play basketball, and so just from an early age, that's what I was exposed to, and that's what I enjoyed doing. Is most little brothers always look up to their older brothers and see what they're doing and want to do that and want to be better than them. So that's kind of the route I took. I was like, I want to play basketball like my brothers and I want to be better than them. And so that's just kind of how it all folded out.
Yeah, definitely. And, I think that experience of kind of growing up around your siblings plays a part. And like you talked about, like kind of that competitive instinct that I'm sure you developed over the years. And obviously, I want to fast forward a little bit in time here as you make that move when you're 15 to the States. And, originally the move is for basketball. But, at the
hmm
time, what was kind of going through your mind that inspired you to take pretty much a leap of faith and come to the United States when, you were still a teenager?
Yeah. So, first of all, it wasn't an easy decision, especially for my parents, because, letting your 15-year-old son go off to a different country, um, is pretty difficult, I would imagine. So it was a difficult decision to begin with, but I think at the end of the day, my parents saw how much sports in general, but more specifically basketball, meant to me and how much I wanted to make that happen. And so the three of us came to the conclusion that the best way for me to be able to fully pursue what I wanted to pursue would be to move to the States. And so that decision, came about, and I moved when I was 15, sophomore in high school, to the Chicagoland area. And again, like I said, and you mentioned before, is for basketball. Um, and I think just in terms of exposure, there's really not a lot in Panama. So, and even for soccer now, there's not a ton of exposure for the kids in Panama. It's hard to get out. So coming to the States for high school or coming to the States for college is a huge jump for those kids and for myself just to be exposed to more opportunity.
Yeah. No doubt. And I mean, obviously, as you mentioned there, the United States, specifically for basketball, has the most exposure in the entire world. So I think something that obviously is interesting mentioning is, you make the move for basketball, yet obviously soccer plays a big part when you get here. Was that the plan when you first came to the U.S. to play multiple sports, or how did you get drawn into playing in soccer at a high school setting? Because I think nowadays, if you look at a typical pathway of any high level athlete once they reach high school, I mean, a lot of times, at least for soccer, they focus on one sport. Like there's not multiple sports going on. So how did you come into the sport once you're in the United States?
Yeah, so the high school that I went to, Wheaton Academy, actually has a fairly successful soccer team. So, um, I was playing soccer in Panama for my school and stuff, and so I wanted to keep playing because I enjoyed it and I thought it was fun. And I think, even though I came to the States to pursue basketball, there was part of me in the back of my mind where I was thinking that may not work out, and I'm getting kind of good at this soccer thing, might as well stick with it and see where that leads as well. So there was part of me too that was kind of thinking, in the long run, soccer may end up actually being the right move for me. But yeah, so we had a really successful soccer team at my high school, and I really started to enjoy playing soccer. And I think with any sport, if you're part of a successful team, it's more fun than being part of a team that's not as successful, which is the case with my basketball team. So, on one hand, I had a team that was not, very successful. On the other hand, I had the soccer team that was doing very well and playing with some pretty quality players that played, D1 and good D2s and stuff like that. So I just, yeah, started to just enjoy it more. It was more fun. And again, basketball's a tough sport to make it in, especially professionally. So you start to mature and grow up a little bit and understand that, it's probably not where I'm gonna go pro. So kind of start thinking about other options, and so soccer it was.
Yeah. So in what moment in your soccer career did you feel like, okay, I'm gonna try to play in college? Was it a moment with your club team, your high school team? Is there a specific moment where you kind of realized?
Yeah. So I think it was, I would say my senior year of high school. We My junior year of high school, we had a phenomenal team. Um, and we lost in like the second round of playoffs, like a shocker. We should not have lost. And my senior year of high school, we had basically like a brand new team, and we were not supposed to be that good, but we ended up making it all the way to state. And I think after that season, I thought to myself like, this is probably what I'm gonna pursue in college. Um, I still had basketball season because in Chicago or Illinois, soccer's in the fall, so basketball season's after it. So I still was like, on the fence a little bit just because I had basketball season right after that. But I think that was kind of the turning point for me was that senior season of high school. But yeah, I think then moving into the basketball season and then at the end of basketball season, I felt pretty solid and confident in my decision to play college soccer.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting nowadays if people think of the background to get into college soccer, and you have to start the process incredibly early. And you have to have everything figured out by the end of your junior season, or else you're leaving yourself in a difficult spot going into your senior year. And you've spoken in the past about how going into that kind of process of getting ready to play college soccer, you had very very few schools that were interested, and also really no school that wanted to offer you any sort of money. So what was that kind of process like in terms of obviously you had kind of made that decision there to pursue soccer at a higher level, but you don't have a ton of opportunities, at least not at the Division 1 level, and also at the Division 2 and Division 3 level. Very few that seem that committed to you. What was kind of your mindset and approach going through that part of the process?
Yeah, I mean, throughout my entire life, whether it's soccer, basketball, or just in any area of life, I've always bet on myself. I know the work that I put in to get to the places I'm at, and I never shy away from competition and from a challenge. So even though I didn't necessarily have, those options like to go D1 or, even scholarships really, um, I knew that if I put the work in, I would be able to, win the starting spot at my D2. if I put the work in and we did well, I would, be able to transfer to a D1 and then, so on and so forth. So, uh, I've always had the mentality that I'm going to work hard and, control what I can control, give the rest up to God. And I know that, from there, his plan is the best. And, everything I can do that I can control, I'm going to do 100% and it's all going to work out.
No doubt. And I think, that mindset you have is something I want to kind of pursue here because that's a mindset that I think every player should develop, yet it's extremely hard to develop. And I think the players that make it the farthest over their careers have developed that. But to me, it almost seems like it came natural to you. Where did that kind of come from? Was that something that was ingrained to you at a young age from your parents? Or is that something you kind of developed over time? Like, where did that approach of kind of just riding over negatives and riding over lulls in your career, where did that come from?
Yeah, I think from a few different things. First, I think, a lot of people have different things that help them, but I think for me, obviously, faith is one of the big things in my life, and I think having faith is super important in terms of, being able to get over the lows and that kind of stuff. So that's one area I would say is very important that helps me, be the way I am. I also think that my parents and the way they raised me were very instrumental in that way. I think my dad especially was just hard enough on me to the point where it was like you don't have time to feel sorry for yourself, but also just loving enough to the point where it's like I know he's got my back, even though sometimes it's tough love. So I think just again the way I was raised and this, with my parents as well and their faith, I think the two of those things were very instrumental in how how I approach things now.
Yeah, I definitely think that combination of having a good support system and, like you said, having that faith in God, especially during the low moments when you think everything is not going your way, and if you could put your full understanding in Him and realize that you might not understand it now, but eventually you will. I definitely think that helps younger athletes if you're looking for that escape. I definitely think what JD's saying has been a testament in my career as well. So I just wanted to touch on.
For sure.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think believing in a higher power and just having that belief that everything is bigger than you at the end of the day, I think kind of grounds you. And I think you both put it into perspective so well there. And shifting a little bit, obviously, in your college career, I know one of the things you spoke upon in the past was how difficult that first year was, and how it was the first time you weren't playing. And I'm sure Anthony can also speak upon this is when you're a goalkeeper in a high level environment and you're not playing, how difficult those moments are. Yet you also spoke upon it and saying how important that year was for you. Could you go in a little bit more of a detail of one, how difficult that period was for you, and two, how you were able to overcome it and now look upon it as such a key and instrumental year in your career?
Yeah, well, first of all, like you said, it was pretty tough because, you know, everybody plays a sport because they want to be on the field or on the court, whatever it is. Nobody wants to be sitting on the bench. So to go from playing all the time to, not playing at all, it was definitely a hard adjustment for me because, you think to yourself like, oh, like I'm good, like I've been playing all these years, I should be playing, like I have the ability. Um, but for one reason or the other, that wasn't the case for me. So it was tough, but I also think that having, let's just call it a setback like that, I think can be very instrumental too in the growth of a player because I think that having that year where I wasn't playing helped me almost up my intensity of how hard I wanted to work to get to where I wanted to be. Like I was doing extra gym sessions, always doing extra field sessions, and I think if I had come in as a freshman and I was starting right away, I'm not sure I necessarily would have been approaching it the same way, especially, as an 18-year-old kid. Um, so I think in its own way, even though it was very challenging for me and I didn't necessarily like that year, I think it, helped shape me into the player I am now.
Yeah, I think especially JD as a goalkeeper, once you get into that top level environment, whether that's college, professional level, national team, you're never going to go in and be a number one right away. And I think that's something that we
Hmm.
fail to realize as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old going to college. Every you're travel team's captain, you're your high school's captain. You play every single minute, you get all these awards, and then you get to college, and all 28 guys on the roster were the same as you. And I definitely think it's a hard pill to swallow at first, but like you said, ever since college and then national team professional, you started at the back end, and that hard work and that perseverance of yours always leads you to the success. So obviously now first team coming soon, and hopefully it's going to be the exact same story.
Yeah, hopefully. Got to keep working.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, as you both kind of touched on here, I think, as you mentioned there, JD, I think it's hugely important to have, those moments in your career where you're not playing and you have to go through those moments where you feel like you have to work harder and improve. I think those moments when you kind of realize where you're at and, a team's packing order, just in moments in life when you realize you have a lot of work to go are so important. But, also at the same time, it can be extremely difficult going through those moments and not playing and also doing work for what seems like no reason. So kind of mentally, could you walk us through how you kind of got through that period of, were there days where you felt like, what's the point of me doing this? Or, were there moments where you kind of had to almost talk yourself into doing something like, can you kind of take us back through your mindset during that time period?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was days where I'm like, I'm putting all this work in for what? Like, it doesn't matter. I'm still sitting the bench, like I'm not playing. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's definitely days where you feel that way. But I think for me, again, it comes down to as a player, there's only so much you can control, and if you're spend too much time thinking about the things that you can't control, I think that's where you see players that, fall apart and crumble because they're overthinking everything. So for me, it was like, yeah, this situation sucks and I don't like it, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put as much hard work in the gym and on the field to prove that I deserve to be the number one and to make it as difficult a decision as possible for the coach to not play me. And so just having that approach on a daily basis, again, I mean, I wasn't perfect. Some days were hard and, you some days you just like it sucks and I can't think straight. But I would say for the most part, like if you have that approach on a daily basis, it really helps with just controlling what you can control and having that approach, that's kind of what got me through it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you put it very well and very much in the words there, just kind of, taking the idea of what you can control, what you can control. And obviously, it pays off handsomely. You spend 3 years at Biola and you have this extremely successful career. And don't want to gloss over that, but want to get into your time at Memphis because I know that's an incredibly interesting experience. And, obviously, it's an experience where you build upon it immensely and, make the leap into the professional game. But one thing I don't want to gloss over here is you coming into an environment where the starter was established, and now that starter is actually pressed on in his career and even now playing at the professional level himself. But you go into that environment again, and you're not the number one guy. At least on paper, you're having to fight for the job. So, what was kind of your thought process in going into a position like that? And can you even walk us through kind of how that experience shaped you into kind of the player you are today?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, transferring from where I was, the solidified number one, I was coming off of all conference goalkeeper, like all regionals, some awards, whatever, like coming off of that to, um, sorry, coming off of that to, going to a school where there's no, you know, I may not be playing, obviously is a huge risk, but I think, and I think I mentioned this last time we spoke, but if you don't ever put yourself out there and you don't ever take risks, like you're not going to get anywhere in life or in pro sports. If you stay where you're comfortable, you never push yourself out of your comfort zone, you're never going to know if you have what it takes to hack it at the next level. So for me, that was my thought process. I was like, if I'm going to play pro, like I got to go play D1 and I got to go prove that I can play Division 1 level and then go on from there. Um, so again, yeah, I came into a school with a starter that, Cullen is a great goalkeeper, and it was not going to be easy for me to win the spot. And, quite frankly, I didn't win the spot at the beginning of the season. He played the first few games, and again, it's difficult sitting on the bench, but you just wait for your time, and when your opportunity comes, you seize it, and you just make the most of it, and don't look back from there.
Yeah, no doubt there. And, I think the experience you had, you put very well in the words there, but obviously you never put yourself outside your comfort zone. There's no way for you to ever to improve. And I know during the course of that season too, as Anthony has mentioned here, it was an interesting time period because you kind of go back and forth. And, I think it's an experience that can only be best summed up by goalies. And I think it's something we touched upon earlier too, of, that special relationship you have with the goalkeepers around you. But, kind of what was that experience like for you of kind of battling back and forth and with someone you're competing with on an everyday basis, yet someone that's also you're considering almost like your best friend during that process.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think when you think of competition, you think like, oh, I can't like the person I'm competing against because I have to beat them out. We can't have any type of relationship. But at the end of the day, especially for goalkeepers, that's not how it goes. I think when you step onto the field, you compete and you do your best to prove that you're better than the other person. But as soon as you step off the field, the only thing I'm thinking about is this is my friend, this is my brother. Even on the field, I want to push him so that he improves on a daily basis too. Like I want him to feel uncomfortable because I want him to get better, if that makes sense. So I think especially for goalkeepers, as a number two or number three, you your job until you get the nod to be the number one is to push the first goalie to be as best as they can be. And when I wasn't playing, that was my approach. And when I was playing, you still want to approach it the same way, as nothing is guaranteed. I have to prove every day that I deserve to be playing. And so I think you can separate the competition, I guess, from the friendship. All the goalies that I've been with in both universities I went to are still good friends to me. I think it's goalies are weird that we have that weird relationship, the goalkeeper union, whatever. But it doesn't take away from the fact that we're always competing with each other. So I think it's hard to separate sometimes, but I think especially when you have a good group like we did at Memphis, it makes it easier.
Yeah, I definitely think you got to be an interesting type of guy to be a goalkeeper to begin with.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was lucky enough to, like we touched on earlier, play with JD. And at the time, he was the new guy, and I was the number two competing for the one. And I already had plans of leaving, but every single day I would try to get under his skin during training. I would laugh if I score. Or, you just got to push each other in different ways. And I would try to make sure I got under everyone's skin. But once you step off the field, you guys are brothers. And at the end of the day, when sports are over, you remember the relationships, and obviously
Yeah,
that will always be more important than the sport.
definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. At the end of the day, you know, you're going to retire at some point and you're not going to be playing soccer at some point. So it's about the relationships you form and the friendships you make because, those are the things that last.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you put it really well there again. Of obviously, I think goalkeeper is such an interesting position because as field players, the field player I can speak upon here myself. Like you are competing against your direct competition, but there's so many other things that could happen. You can switch formations. The other player can shift to the other side of the field. There's just so many different things that can happen. Whereas goalkeeper, it's one guy. Yet I think the relationships and the bonds goalkeepers have between each other is something that's special and so unique. So I'm really glad we touched upon that there. And obviously, want to shift into that kind of time period in between your career. Obviously, you graduate college and now realize you have an opportunity to break into the professional game. Yet, kind of seems like every other chapter of your career, you don't have a bunch of opportunities waiting for you right away. Obviously, you didn't get drafted. So, what was that period like for you? Of obviously, you don't get drafted. You want to make a move to the professional game. I know you spoke upon the idea that you went on multiple trials and that was a very unique process, but kind of again, what was your mental approach going into that next chapter of your career?
Yeah, again, I mean, like I said before, I always bet on myself. Like I knew I had the ability to play at the professional level, but at the same time, without the hard work, putting in hard work and improving that you deserve to play at the professional level, you're not going to get there. So, um, yeah, I mean, it was an interesting experience. Obviously, didn't get drafted. I didn't think I would, so it wasn't necessarily like a big shock to me not to be drafted. But going into the trials and stuff, you're thinking about like, oh, I have to perform, I have to perform, I have to perform, because if I don't, I'm not getting signed. So, having that mindset of going in every day and just putting your best foot forward and performing can be difficult. But I think obviously I did that and then got signed with the Revs. But there's always that thought process in the back of your head of, am I doing enough, or you know, am I performing well today? But again, I think it just comes down to controlling what you can control and giving the rest up to God, and just, playing free, because when you put the pressure on yourself, it's obviously more difficult. But um, yeah, it's definitely a unique experience, going from a D2 to a D1 to now professional. Is a, let's say, not a common route, but definitely, I think, a testament to just the hard work pays off.
Yeah, no doubt. Then I think what you say there at the end is one, it's not a common route, and two, it's a route that I think every player at the Division 2 level kind of dreams of. They make those steps, and there's really no kind of bumps in the road along the way. Obviously, you don't see the everyday battles you face and everything like that. But I mean, obviously, you're making a progressive step each year, and I'm kind of curious as well. Are there moments kind of through that process for you where you kind of have to stop and take everything in? And what is that kind of process like? Of obviously you must be through the roof. Obviously, you're making, these massive jumps and massive leaps in your career. How are you staying focused on every single day basis? Like you spoke upon there. I mean, obviously, faith for you is a big part of that. But what else are you doing on a kind of a day to day basis to make sure you're staying in the moment?
Yeah, for sure. Faith, I mean, I think is the biggest one. I'd say without that, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. I think it's just been super helpful for my journey. Um, I think as well, just, having, like we mentioned earlier, just a good support group around you, whether it's friends, family. I think having people that are always pushing me to be the best I can be has helped me a lot. Um, but yeah, again, I think it really, for me, has just come down to those two things in terms of, keeping me grounded, but also helping me to push through the days that are difficult and stuff like that. So I think just, again, faith and family are the two biggest ones for me.
No doubt. Obviously, that's been a theme of this podcast so far. But obviously, the people you have around you, and obviously, God above all is the most important thing. And I think that's just a great way to put it there. And also, I want to speak upon something that I think a lot of people from the outside don't see about MLS Next Pro specifically, and that it's oftentimes difficult for somebody who's not come through the academy to get opportunities right away. And again, as a goalkeeper, you spoke upon this earlier, and Anthony hit on it as well. You come into a new situation and you're not the starter once again. And obviously, this is a completely whole different experience because you're going into an environment where, the person starting over you is a lot younger than you. So, what was that experience kind of like? And having to earn your way into the starting 11 and also in a professional setting this time.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, coming into a professional setting where the keeper is younger than me, and it's maybe a keeper they want to develop or whatever, however you want to look at it, it can be a bit intimidating, obviously, because you're thinking to yourself, like, I don't know if, even if I may be better, I don't know if I'm going to play, because maybe they want to play him and develop him. Um, but again, I think I've been in this situation before, even though it wasn't necessarily with a younger keeper. I have come in and been on the bench and won the starting job. And so for me, I was thinking to myself, like, I'm just going to do what I've done before, trust myself, work hard, and, give the rest up to God, and control what I can control. And at the end of the day, when I got the opportunity, I, you know, seized it, and, didn't look back from there. So I think just always being ready in any situation, because you never know where you're gonna get called upon. And I think you've seen this, with other goalkeepers across the world. The number one goes down hurt. this number two comes in, balls out, and next thing you know, they're the number one. And so it just shows you how fast things can change. And I think that was kind of my thought process as well. As once I get that opportunity, I'm gonna, you know, do what I know how to do, and hopefully it just goes up from there.
Yeah, I think you hit it right on the spot. I think you have a common theme here. There hasn't been one situation, obviously, where you've been handed the one, probably high school, but that's about it. And like you
Yep.
said, being the number two, you always have to be ready. And I know for younger goalkeepers who have this question, like, when am I going to get my opportunity? When am I going to get my shot? Obviously, you have to continue to work hard, especially when no one's watching. I know JV was big on staying after practice, working on things that needed improvement. And obviously, as a number two, you're analyzing what the number one is better than you at during training, during games. And obviously, you want to be better. It's a competition at the end of the day. And that's something that I can testify to is the hard work, and eventually you get your shot 100%. Like you said, God's timing is never wrong. So
Yeah, I think too, instead of asking the question of, oh, when am I going to get my opportunity, you should ask, when I get my opportunity, am I going to make the most of it? Because
yeah,
your opportunity will come at some point, but if you're not ready for it and you mess it up, that's your own fault, you know? So having the mindset of, I will get a chance at some point, I just have to be ready for it and to make the most of it instead of when will I get my, chance, I think is an important way to distinguish too.
yeah,
Yeah, no doubt there. I think you kind of hit it there at the end of talking about how, when am I going to get that opportunity versus if I'm going to get that opportunity. If you're constantly looking at when, again, it speaks on something you were talking about earlier of, are you doing that extra work? What is your mindset going into that extra work? If you're constantly thinking, when I'm going to get the opportunity, I'm going to be prepared. I think you hit it perfect there. And something I want to touch on here that's a little bit different than what we've been talking about, but I know is extremely unique at New England Revolution is you guys' home stadium jumps around quite a bit. I know sometimes you're playing games up in New Hampshire, sometimes you're playing games down in New England, sometimes you're playing at Gillette Stadium. What is that process kind of like of your home field's kind of continuously jumping around and, the atmosphere is never quite the same? How is that experience as a professional player?
Yeah, it was a bit interesting last season because it was almost like when we played up in New Hampshire, it was like our home away from home. Um, but I think, just being prepared doesn't matter if it's a home game, away game. You're still 22 guys on a pitch with one ball, two goals. You are still playing the same game regardless of where it's at, I think is how you have to approach it because, away games can be tough where there's, a big crowd or whatever, or a home game, it doesn't change for me. Um, but I think, I don't know for sure. I think this year we're supposed to play our home games at Gillette only, so that will be a welcome change.
but yeah, I seen a few videos last season where you guys were playing at Southern New Hampshire, and I was
Yeah,
pretty confused that I didn't know what was going on. I
yeah,
actually didn't know you guys were bouncing around, so obviously it must be tough to acclimate. But like you said, at the end of the day, it's a game's a game. So it doesn't
yeah,
matter if you're
definitely.
playing in a college stadium or in a parking lot. That competitiveness will always drive you. So
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, 100%. To kind of finish off here, I want to finish with a rapid few questions. And starting off, if you could go back in one moment in your career, what moment would you go back to? And could you describe kind of why you would go back to that moment?
last week,
Yeah, I think playing for the national team, man, that was the the best experience I've ever had in my life. Um, I wish I could just relive that day over and over and over. Because it was just, yeah, it was incredible.
Yeah, definitely, no doubt. And, we spoke upon it a little bit, but what do you feel like the most difficult moment of your career was?
Probably my freshman year of college coming in, after being a pretty good high school goalie and then going to college and not playing was a gut check for sure, and it humbled me a lot and showed me that I had a lot of work to do.
Definitely. And lastly, here, what is one piece of advice you could give to your 5-year-old self?
Oof. Um,
good one, Kelly.
I would say don't be afraid to put yourself out there. Trust in your ability, work hard, and trust God.
Amen.
Completely. I think that's a fantastic answer there. And JD, again, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, I know this is the second time I've been able to interview here, but it's a fantastic interview each time. And I can't speak enough on you as a human being, as a player. I think the leaps and bounds you've even made in just the last year since we talked is unbelievable. And I think you're a role model for so many goalkeepers and so many players throughout the country right now. Of obviously your pathway is something every player wants to replicate, but I think just you as a human being as well is something that so many people should replicate over the course of your career. So thank you again for coming on.
Of course, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, lots changed since last time we spoke last year, so hopefully we can have another year like that.
Yeah, for real. JD, I need a jersey soon to hang in the back.
I got you, bro. Send me the Addy.
Yeah, I will for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And if we will continue to do these each year, if your career continues to progress the way it is. So
Yeah,
again, yeah, a pleasure to have you on, and best of luck this upcoming season.
thank you guys. Appreciate it.
He'll be in La Liga next year.
I can say, yeah.
I
Thank you
would
again.
love that.
We'll see. So thank you again, and enjoyed that as the first episode.